There are stories that travel through 14 centuries and still arrive with the power to make the air in the room feel different. This is one of them. It began on an ordinary night in Medina, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The companions had gathered around him as they often did, sitting close, listening, the lamplight throwing their shadows long across the wall. And the Prophet began to speak about a subject that had occupied prophets and believers since the beginning of recorded time. He spoke about the Dajjal, the deceiver, the Antichrist, the great trial that would come at the end of days, a being of enormous power and profound deception, unlike anything the world had ever produced, whose appearance would signal that the final chapter of human history had truly begun. The companions listened. They had heard the Prophet speak of the Dajjal before. They knew the signs, the one eye, the letters on the forehead, the false miracles, the claim to divinity. They knew the warnings. They knew the prayers for protection. But what none of them expected, what no one in that gathering could have anticipated, was what one of them was about to confess. His name was Tamim ibn Aus al-Dari. He was a man of remarkable history even before this moment. A Christian by birth, from the Palestinian tribe of Al-Dar, he had converted to Islam and become one of the companions of the Prophet. He was known as a man of deep piety, of night-long prayers, of serious and careful reflection. He was not a man who invented stories. He was not a man who spoke loosely about matters of the unseen. And yet what he rose to say that night, what he asked permission to share before the entire gathering, was something so extraordinary that the Prophet himself stopped the assembly, turned to the people and said, "Listen to what Tamim is about to tell you." Because Tamim al-Dari had seen something, not in a dream, not in a vision, in person, with his own eyes. Before he had even embraced Islam, before he had ever heard the Prophet's descriptions of the Dajjal, Tamim al-Dari had sailed into the unknown reaches of the sea, and he had found what was waiting there. The voyage had begun, as many things do, in an ordinary way. Tamim and 30 men from his tribe set sail from the shores of Palestine, heading out into open water. The accounts do not tell us exactly what they were seeking, perhaps trade, perhaps exploration, perhaps simply the kind of journey that men in that era undertook as a matter of course, reading the stars and trusting the wind, and committing themselves to God's mercy over the open sea. For a month, they sailed without incident. Then the storms came. The sea turned against them without warning, the way the sea has always been able to do. 1 hour calm and manageable, the next violent and absolute in its power. The waves rose. The wind became a wall. The ship was thrown across the ocean like a child's toy dropped in a river, and the 30 men aboard could do nothing but grip what they could grip and pray and wait for the sea to decide what it wanted to do with them. For days the storm held them. For days there was no sense of direction, no certainty of survival, no sky visible through the cloud and the spray. And then, as storms do, it released them. When the air cleared and the sea calmed and the men could finally look around and assess what remained, they found that they had been driven far from any course they knew. They were in waters none of them recognized, beneath a sky that felt unfamiliar. And somewhere in the blurred distance, emerging from the haze the way land always emerges from the sea, with the slow, insistent solidity of something that has been waiting, there was an island. They approached it cautiously, reading the water, reading the light. The island appeared uninhabited. There were no fires, no boats drawn up on the beach, no sounds of human activity in the air, just land, and the vegetation of land, and the particular silence of a place that has not been touched by people in a very long time. They went ashore, and it was then that they saw the animal. It was a creature the narrations describe as extremely hairy, so covered in thick, tangled hair that its front could not be distinguished from its back. Tamim and his companions stood and looked at this thing, and the thing stood and looked at them. Then it spoke, in a human voice, in words they could understand. It said, "I am Al-Jassasa, the spy, the scout, the watcher." The men looked at each other. Everything about this moment was wrong. Wrong in the particular way that things become wrong when you have crossed from the ordinary world into something else entirely, something that operates by different rules, something that the ordinary vocabulary of your life cannot contain. They asked it, "What are you? What is this place? Why are you here?" The creature said nothing more about itself. Instead, it pointed inland, towards something waiting beyond the line of trees, and it said, "That man in the monastery, he has been waiting a long time for news from you. Go to him." I want you to hold that image for a moment. 30 sailors on an unknown island, storm-battered, disoriented, far from any world they knew. A creature that should not exist, covered in matted hair, speaking in a human voice. And now a direction given. Go there. Towards something waiting in the interior of the island that already knew they were coming. Any reasonable man would have turned back to his ship. Tamim and his companions did not turn back. Whether it was courage or compulsion, or simply the strange gravity that extraordinary moments generate around themselves, they went. They moved inland, following the direction the creature had pointed, through the trees, toward the monastery, and the accounts describe it as a monastery, a structure, a place of confinement, and as they approached it they began to hear something. The sound of chains, heavy, iron, the unmistakable dragging rhythm of something bound. They entered. 2. What Tamim described seeing in that place is recorded in the hadith collections of Imam Muslim, authenticated by scholars across centuries as a sound and reliable narration. It is not folklore, it is not legend. It sits in the most respected body of prophetic tradition in Islamic scholarship, transmitted through chains of narrators that scholars have examined and verified across 1400 years. What Tamim saw was a man, or something in the shape of a man, enormous, the most powerfully built creature he had ever seen. Bound at the wrists and ankles with iron chains, those chains fastened to the walls and floor, with a thoroughness that suggested that whatever was doing the binding was taking absolutely no chances. The being's hands were chained behind its back, wrists bound to neck, the posture of absolute, total restraint. And one eye that worked. The other was flat, smooth, covered over, exactly as the prophet had described. A single burning eye that looked at you and seemed to see through you, past you, around you, cataloging everything about you with a precision that felt deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. The being looked at the men who had come to stand before it. Then it began to ask questions. The questions it asked were specific, not random, not the confused outbursts of something trapped and maddened by confinement. These were the questions of something that had been waiting and thinking and tracking the world outside its chains from whatever information it could gather. The questions of an intelligence that had been lying still for a very long time, with nothing to do but plan. It asked about the date palms of Baisan. Were they bearing fruit? Were they still producing? Tamim answered, yes, they were producing. The being's expression shifted. Some internal calculation had been made. It asked about the lake of Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee. Was it still full of water, still as it had been? Yes, Tamim said, full of water. Another calculation, another internal settling. It asked about the spring of Zugar in the south. Was it flowing? Were the people of that place still drinking from it and irrigating their lands? Yes, still flowing. And then came the question that was different from all the others. The question that had been waiting underneath all of these. The real question, the one the others had been building toward. It asked about the prophet. It asked, has the prophet of the unlettered people appeared? Has he come forth? What are people doing with him? Have they followed him or rejected him? Tamim told it, yes, he has appeared. The people have followed him, believed in him, and accepted him. And at that, the narrations say, the being became agitated, something between fury and urgency. Something that looked like a creature that has been counting down to a moment, and has just been told that the counting is further along than it realized. It said, and these are the words recorded in Sahih Muslim, the words the prophet then repeated to his companions in the mosque, know that it is better for them to obey him. I will tell you about myself. I am the Dajjal. I will be permitted to emerge. I will go out and travel throughout the earth. I will not leave any town without entering it, except for Mecca and Medina. Those two I will not be permitted to enter. Every time I try to enter either of them, an angel with a drawn sword will stand before me and drive me back. Tamim al-Dari stood in that monastery, on that island, in those unknown waters, and listened to the most feared being in Islamic eschatology announce its own name. Then he returned to his ship. Then he sailed back to the world he knew. Then he waited, as converts do who carry something extraordinary into their new faith, for the moment to share what he had seen. That moment came in Medina, in the Prophet's mosque, on the very night the Prophet had been speaking to the companions about the Dajjal. When the Prophet gave Tamim the floor and he began to speak, the companions sat and listened to a man describe in precise detail a creature they had only ever heard described in warning. The Prophet confirmed every element of the account. More than confirmed, he was moved by it. He said that Tamim's story pleased him, that it agreed with everything he had been telling the people. And then he pointed east and told the companions that the Dajjal was in the sea, in that direction, waiting. Now, let us sit with what this account actually contains, because the hadith of Tamim al-Dari is not simply a frightening story to tell around a fire. It is a piece of Islamic eschatological evidence with enormous implications, and scholars have spent 14 centuries examining those implications with great care. The first and most arresting implication is this: the Dajjal is not a future creation. It is not something that will be brought into existence at the end of time. It already existed at the time of Tamim al-Dari. It was already alive, already bound, already waiting, already asking questions about the world outside its chains and counting down to its release. It has been waiting for over 1400 years. The chains that hold it are real chains, on a real island, in a real sea. And somewhere on this earth, in a location hidden from human knowledge, there is a being of immense power sitting in iron restraints, feeling its permitted moment approach, asking its questions through whatever means remain available to it, watching the conditions that will allow its freedom. The questions it asked Tamim were not arbitrary. Scholars note that they were ecological and political questions, questions about the health of specific locations, about water, about crops, about the status of prophetic authority in the world. These were the questions of something that tracks the conditions that precede its release, something that knows its freedom is conditional, something that is watching for signs, and the signs, in the Islamic tradition, are signs of civilizational collapse. The drying of the Sea of Galilee, which is, it must be noted, at historically critical water levels in our own time. The withering of crops. The breakdown of truth in public life. The confusion of people about what is real and what is false. The erosion of the spiritual order that keeps humanity oriented toward God rather than toward the great deception that is coming. The creature called Al-Jassasa, the spy, is its own mystery within the account. It does not explain itself. It does not threaten or attack the sailors. It simply directs them toward the one in chains. Scholars have discussed for centuries what Al-Jassasa actually is: a servant of the Dajjal, a creature assigned to that island for the specific purpose of guiding those who stumble upon it, a being whose entire function is defined by service to the one it guards. Some scholars interpret it as a jinn, assigned to the island the way guards are assigned to a prison, ensuring that the prisoner stays contained. Others read it as something like the Dajjal's herald, sent not to prevent discovery but to orchestrate it, ensuring that word of the Dajjal's existence reaches the outside world regularly, a reminder delivered deliberately to anyone the sea drives close enough to hear it. Both interpretations carry weight. If it is a guard, then the island is an active prison being maintained by a power greater than the Dajjal itself. If it is a herald, then Tamim's arrival was not an accident of weather and waves. It was arranged. There is one more element of this account that deserves your full attention, because it is the element that transforms this story from a frightening incident into something with direct, living relevance to every Muslim who will ever read or hear it. The Dajjal said it could not enter Mecca or Medina, every town, every city. The being declared with the certainty of something that has long foreknowledge that it would enter every populated place on earth. It would not touch these two. Angels with drawn swords would turn it back every single time. This is not a detail thrown in for effect. This is a statement about the nature of spiritual reality, about the fact that there are places where God's protection is anchored so completely that even the greatest deception in human history cannot penetrate it. The protected cities are not protected by walls or armies. They are protected by what has been prayed there, remembered there, transmitted there, across every generation from the first revelation until the day of judgment. The Dajjal knows this, and it told Tamim, which means it intended for the prophet to hear it, which means it intended for every Muslim across every century to understand. There is a protection available that I cannot overcome. There is a door that I, with all my power and all my deception and all my false miracles, cannot open. The message embedded in the Dajjal's own confession is that refuge exists. Ta'ashimur, this is why the Prophet, after confirming Tamim's account, instructed every Muslim to seek refuge from the Dajjal in every single prayer, in the dua recited after the tashahhud before the final salutation of peace. O God, I seek your refuge from the punishment of the grave, from the punishment of the fire, from the trials of life and death, and from the evil of the trial of the Dajjal. 14 times a day, at minimum, a Muslim who prays says these words. This was not inserted arbitrarily. The Prophet made this protection obligatory in the prayer because the threat is real, the being is real, the chains will one day be removed, and the only armor that will hold when that day comes is the armor that has been built, quietly, daily, prayer by prayer, over an entire lifetime of turning toward God. The image I keep returning to is this one. Tamim al-Dari, standing in that monastery, on that nameless island, in waters no map had named, looking at the most feared creature in the Islamic account of the end of time. And the creature is bound. It is enormous. It has one terrible, burning eye. It commands a servant creature that should not exist. It speaks of the day it will emerge and cross the whole earth like a flood. But it is in chains. Its permitted moment has not come. The conditions were not yet met. The Prophet was alive. The truth was still anchored in the world, and so the Dajjal sat, and it asked its questions, and it counted, and it waited. It is still waiting. Somewhere out there, across water that no storm will carry you to by accident twice, in its monastery of iron and silence, something that has been alive longer than any civilization currently standing is sitting in its chains, feeling the permitted moment draw closer, watching the signs accumulate, asking its questions through whatever channels remain open to it. Tamim al-Dari came back from that island and told what he had seen. The Prophet said, "Listen to him." That instruction has not expired. We are still listening. And somewhere out there, in the direction of the east, something is still counting.